Everybody, welcome along to Percussion Discussion, episode 119, part 2. First of all, as usual, please check out all of our social media. You'll find us on Facebook, Instagram, and now Threads. Also, don't forget to check out our world-famous YouTube channel, where you can see all videos, conversations, past and present. If you wouldn't mind subscribing, it just makes sure it keeps you informed when we get some new content up. Don't want you to miss that. If you'd rather listen on the go, then all of the conversations are available in podcast form. These are free to download from your favorite podcast provider. So if that's your thing, get on, download it. If you can rate and review us, really helps like-minded drummers find us and like us, or hopefully like us as much as you do. Anyway, we're going to be carrying on from last week with the wonderful Chris Jago. We've had some really nice comments and messages come through about Chris. He might not be, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, he might not be a household name like some of the other drummers I've had, but his body of work speaks for itself. He's done some remarkable stuff and some things that you're going to hear about in this episode, which I find absolutely mind-blowing. I really do. So thanks for all the nice comments. So here we go with part 2. There's one story in particular which I found it absolutely remarkable. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed talking to the fabulous Chris Jago. We have to talk about where it began for you a little bit. It's quite well documented. You've done a few of these and the thing with Don Famularo, but I think, you know, we won't spend too much time on it, but, you know, let's talk about the early days of Chris Jago. Where did the music kick in for you?
Kicked in watching local bands in local bars.
Yeah.
So there was a band called Harvest Moon that were cover bands, and the guitarist Brian, who's a mate of mine, knocked on my dad's door because my dad was an upholsterer and had a van, and asked would my dad drive his band to the gig. Oh,
hello.
No, hang on. Someone's trying to call me. So there we go. Goes to the iPad as well. So I was maybe 13, 14 then. So my dad, because he was like, oh, yeah, I'll help the local kids out. You know, he would drive them to the pub. They'd unload all the gear. And then I'd sit in the corner of the pub with a glass of Coke and watch. I don't think you could even do that now, could you?
Probably not, sadly.
Kick off. But, you know, I'd have like, you know, the pub landlord would come over and be like, it's a glass of Coke, don't move. You sit in the corner, watch the band. Be like, all right, yeah. Shit, yeah, okay. So watching local bands, and then I started doing local gigs at around 15.
Yeah.
And again, cover bands. And then my drum teacher, Dave Joseph, who's no longer with us, legend, he was the resident drummer with the organist, Sue or Carol, at the Aintree.
Oh, Melling Road.
The Melling.
I know, yeah. Carol. Small world, isn't it?
Carol, right, there you go, Carol.
I know Carol.
So they were the duo. So yeah. I would go and watch Dave, and he'd let me get up and play with Carol.
I've seen Dave play then, a really tasty drummer. I've seen Dave play in that.
Yeah, you would have seen Dave play, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Dave's been gone now maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so.
Yeah.
But proper old jazzer.
Yep.
And I had lessons with him for a few years, and he was great. Just smoke while we were doing lessons. The good old days. You know what I mean? His floor tom was where he put his coffee and his fags. So, but he'd never hit it because it was covered in shit. But I didn't know that, so I'd hit it, and it all terrible, terrible. Oh. Quality drum lessons. So that's how it started. No one else in the family played. I was the first. I think I'm going to be the last. None of my kids give a shit. Shame. They're just like, oh, dad with his music. Idiots. And didn't have any music lessons at school. Went to Shawfield's comprehensive, and there was no music lessons.
Yeah.
So I continued getting drum lessons with Dave. I was in some local bands. You know, then started playing Kitty O'Shea's.
Yeah.
And Rosie O'Grady's and Guinan's. They're all called something different now. I think Rosie's is still there, isn't it?
Quite possibly, yeah. Because there's one in Chester.
Rosie's the bottom. Rosie's was on Hanover Street and Wood Street. All those bars playing, playing everything from the Beatles to Elvis to Radiohead, to Oasis, Blair. So that was like mid to late teens doing that. I did that for quite a number of years. And then I actually started, my watch just broke. I'm just putting it back now. Fix it later. And then doing local bands, cover bands, started doing original bands like we all do. We all want to be pop stars, rock stars. So I was in a couple of original bands that I was in for a while. And we opened for the Lightning Seeds. That's I kind of know Shark a little bit. Remember watching him being like, he's tasty. He always had a tiny little drum kit as well. Nailing it. And then the original bands, that went from maybe, 17 to 25. Because I kind of have a line where at 26, I moved here. So there's up to America, and then there's America. And there was a period of a few years where I would come back and still do band stuff in the UK. But up until I moved here, it was a mix of cover bands, original bands, the odd session here and there. I would move in and out of London when I would get real sessions.
Sure.
Because you realize there's only so far you can go in Liverpool if you want to make a living as a session player. So that was a conversation that I'd had. I went and had I'm kind of mixing up the questions here, but I went and had a few lessons with Roy Martin. And Roy, from what I could see at the time, I was maybe 18, 19 at the time, and he was a session player. He was going around the world playing with artists, and he was doing sessions in Liverpool, and he was also in London, and he was doing stuff. And I was like, okay, he's figured it out. He's done it. I want to do that. And I was still playing in the Funky Monks around Liverpool City Centre, 2, 3, sometimes 4 nights a week, doing my original bands, playing at the Lomax and going on the shitty tours around the country, doing all that stuff, still trying to be a rock star, making a bit of money. I was teaching at a girls' school in West Derby, so I'd do that 2 days a week. And I had some other private students that I would teach. So I was just moving around, had my little van full of Sayers, pasty wrappers, that's all I would eat. And I had a conversation with Roy. We had lessons, but he showed me a couple of things. But I wasn't there for that. Not that I didn't need it. But I was there to pick his brain about how do you do this. I'd gotten to the point where I had an opinion of myself enough to go, I think I'm good at this. I think I'm good enough to do it. And you're young, so you're like, well, why not? So after talking to Roy, I was like, okay, I have to get to London. And then I would look in the NME and try and find real gigs, that were in a box that would be wanted drummer for blah, 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 or going wanted for tour. So I did a bunch of stuff like that. And that's kind of how I went from idiot in Toxteth, playing a bit of drums, through all the bands, all the local stuff, and then started doing session stuff,
You've seriously paid your dues, haven't you? That's for certain.
Oh, I've done a lot of I've toured a lot around, obviously, England and the UK, a lot of Europe tours. Actually, through Roy Martin, I got Barclay James Harvest, who's that old prog pop band, I suppose you'd call them. And they were honestly like Spinal Tap. That was like being in Spinal Tap. Hilarious. And oh my God, Mel, this is a good, Jesus Christ. I could tell this story for 3 hours. But quick version, Mel, the drummer, who's no longer with us, again, great guy, great drummer. But he was in the band and he wanted a drummer. And I think Roy was going to do it. And Roy was off doing something else. And he was like, I can't do it. This young lad I've been connected with, he's your man, which is great. This is how it works.
Yeah.
People recommend you. You look up to people. You have a mentor. Like I consider Roy my drumming mentor, and he bestowed this gig onto me. So I was excited because it was my first kind of major European tour. You were playing anything from 1,000 to 5,000 seat places, and this band had a history, and I was like, this is great. I was maybe 21, maybe. And the only tour I'd done with a known band previous to that was China Crisis, another Liverpool band.
Yeah.
And I did that maybe when I was 19, 20, toured with those guys. And that was just around the UK.
Was this before John Legg was in it? Do you know John?
I do know John. Yeah. He's got a great sonikit that I would chew his arm off for, that I think he's still got. I think this was before John Legg.
Yeah.
I think it was. I think I was right after. He was the original guy, and then he passed, and then another well-known guy came in and played for them. And I'm spacing now on the name, like a good, well-known drummer. Anyway, he left. I jumped in. I did maybe a couple of tours.
Yeah.
So the Barclay James Harvest thing, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be great, And I'm like, oh, rock and roll. We're doing these venues. We're on stage. Going to be loads of women drinking. It's going to be amazing. Anyway, none of that. But when I get to rehearsals, the drummer's there. So I'm kind of freaked out by this. I'm like, well, why is the drummer here? So I'm like walking in with my gear, and Mel's sitting there on a Roland V drum kit, which are terrible now. Well, they're not terrible. I don't like them, but they were even worse back then.
Oh, God.
This is 25 years ago. And he's tinkering away and doing his thing. And I was like, well, why am I here? And the guitarist dragged me outside. He's like, right, okay, yeah. We didn't tell you this, but Mel's coming on tour with us. So I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Well, here's what's going to happen. You're going to play the drums on a real drum kit, and he's going to be on a V drum kit next to you. But we may or may not send him out front, depending on how much he drank, because he was having a problem at the time.
Right.
And again, I'm not speaking bad of the dead here. Love Mel, great, but he was having issues, And as we know, it plagues a lot of our brothers and sisters. Substance abuse of any kind. This business promotes it, and it's tough. So, but again, I'm young, green, just willing to go with the flow. I was like, okay. And I was freaked out by it. Yeah. But I was like, well, we're going on tour. So, okay. So we went on tour. So every night I would be on a real drum kit. There would be a gong in the middle of us, super prog, that we'd get to play. And then Mel would be on the other side of the gong playing this massive electric drum kit. And this is back when none of us had in-ears.
Yeah.
So we've got these big wedges, which I really miss. You hit the kick drum when you feel it. I miss that.
God, not many people say that,
Oh, I miss it. I've got the in-ears, which I don't know whether you can see. They've got Liverpool on. Can you see that?
I can't. Oh, yeah, I can see it now. Yeah, I can see a live bird on there.
Live bird on my in-ears.
Lovely. Nice touch.
Yeah, praise the boys. And but he would be so effing loud on stage. And again, he's realized what's going on. He doesn't. I don't think he cared. I don't think he did. He was there for the ride. The fans loved seeing him.
Yeah.
No one gave a shit who I was. No one knows who I am. He thought I was somebody's son playing the drums. Oh, isn't that nice? They brought one of the boys out to give him a go on the drums. Everyone thought it was Mel playing. Doesn't matter. But he would play, but he's drinking. So he'd just be like, he'd play and then he'd just stop and go, I don't like that. That doesn't sound. And he'd just go off on a tangent. And we're like, down. And if I looked at him, game over. So I had to just not look at him. I had to try and phase his volume out because he was blasting at me. And just try and play, So that was that tour. And then we did get lost a few times backstage, exactly like Spinal Tap. And hilarious. Had some good bus japes with them as well. But yes, so that was one of my first like real tours.
Yeah, sure.
You know. And that came from Roy and having Roy as a mentor and being in the city and being involved in the local scene and still doing the shit gigs that you don't want to do.
Of course.
Which I occasionally do shit gigs I don't want to do now. Like sometimes you can't get out of it, you know.
Yeah, of course.
But that's kind of how I got pro. And then from the Barclay James Harvest thing, going down to London, and then I got connected with Boy George.
Yes.
And then that opened up. That came from doing Hedwig.
Mm-hmm.
Hedwig and the Angry Inch, which was my first ever show, which I didn't even know it was a show. I thought it was a band. And I auditioned, got it. And I was like, when are we going on tour? And they're like, it's a show in the West End. But again, it's like, you know, I didn't have a clue.
Yep.
I was underwater, but also you're young, you're confident, you're willing to put yourself in those situations. So I was of the mindset of, okay, I don't know what this is. I'm just going to go down and I learned the shit and I did the thing. And the Americans who were in the room were like, yeah, they give me that, they give me that look.
Yeah.
And we all know that look. We know the look when we're shit because we get that a lot. But we also know the look when someone looks over at you and they go, they give you that little glint in the eye and you go, oh, I think I got this gig. Yeah. And I did, I got it, you know, but I thought it was a band. It wasn't, it was a theatre show. But then that's out then from China Crisis, Barclay James Harvest, going down to London, auditioning for bands down there, and then suddenly getting this Hedwig gig from America. And then that Hedwig gig got me the Boy George gig. And then I was still doing Barclay James Harvest. And then that got me to when I was 26. And then I moved here. And then it's like starting again.
Having those names on the CV, though, it's got to help, hasn't it? I mean, it might not translate when you move across the ocean. I don't know. But, you know, it's got to help, hasn't it? Having a solid, credible CV behind you.
Yes, it does. And I think the fact that it was varied, I think that is good, you know, and the fact that I had done rock and roll and I had done a couple of theatre shows at 26, kind of put me in the loop for a bit more work. Suddenly, the work you can do opens up.
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
Like, I'm not going to Baked Potato to play jazz. I'm not getting those calls because I don't play jazz. I don't listen to jazz. So that's not in my pool. That's not where I'm going to sit. Yeah. But I know my pool is kind of, you know, big enough for me that I know that I can get work in that pool. And it could be rock and roll. It could be a pop artist. It could be a theatre show. It could be sessions for all those people. Like, so the more you can do early on, I think definitely helps.
And the thing,
as you get older.
You haven't got an hour in the day spare as it is, so you don't want to be taking on jazz gigs when it's not your thing. Anyway, you know, you don't need to do it.
No.
Do you? What, so
no. And I always feel like I get annoyed when I see a jazz guy trying to be a pop rock guy.
Yeah. And
they just think, I'm just going to open my eye at it. I'm just going to hit really hard.
Yeah.
And you're like,
doesn't translate.
No, but I don't like it when rock guys try and play jazz. It's terrible.
Yeah.
You know, like occasionally I have to fake a couple of things. And I'm sitting there doing it going, oh my God, I hope there's no one in here that's listening right now. Because you know what I mean? Like I'm good enough to know when I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And to go, when I go and see a jazz guy play and I'm like, oh God, yeah, that's the shit that. So I'm just going to walk away from the drums and not do that at all.
There's very few that can cross over. There are a few though.
There are. Exactly. Yeah, they are.
Not that many who do it convincingly. And
no, that's what I'm saying. And it's like, you know, there is the megastars and we all know who they are. And we worship Steve Gadd, we worship, and Vinnie Colaiuta, we worship. And they can do it all, you know. And that's great. And that's fine. But then there's like a normal level of people. There's normal humans like us that, you know, I consider it a trade. Like I'm a tradesman, you know, and and my dad's a tradesman, and or my uncles were trade. Like, you come from that work ethic and mentality of you plying your trade. And I said this on that last interview, but what's the master of, what is it?
Master of all, Jack of none. Master of none, yeah.
Master of none. But there's a second part of that, which I never remember, that it's something to the effect of, yeah, well, you can do more shit if you're a jack of all trades.
Well, yeah.
Because you couldn't your work options. That if you're a master of one thing, well, that's great.
Yeah.
But then your pool's this.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that. And it's kind of like being a tradesman of, you'd have to do a few things.
Absolutely.
And I've got a few things that I can do. And there's a few things out of this hoop that I can't do. But you know what? I'll call another one of my friends who's that kind of tradesman, and he'll do that gig.
Yeah. I got thrown in the deep end with a gig, a big band gig. And thankfully it wasn't well attended. I said, look, be kind to me. I said, I'm not a big band drummer. Just use your heads. And the opening piece, the band leader just shouts the numbers out. You've got a pad this thick. Pulls it out. It's Cherokee marked at 220.
Oh, yeah.
It's like
1, 2, 3, 4. Ding, ding.
I can't play those dotted rhythms that fast.
Yeah, just Steve Gadd, 8 notes all the way. That's all he does.
In a word, it was horrible. And I was just like, dear God. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like being in those situations. Like, there's definitely, as I've gotten older, I'm not as excited about the unknown as I used to be. Like, we recorded for the Tonys for Shucked.
Yeah.
And we have to go in, and it's music, but like, you're thrown into a studio on someone else's drum kit, doing kind of music, but then you've got a mixer that you don't know, that's not set up for you, and it's literally 1 or 2 takes at most again.
Yeah.
And so you're sitting down and you go, okay, well, I'm hitting the rims here. Or what's the mix like? Before you got a chance to do anything, the conductor's going, okay, we're going to do a take. And you're like, hang on, I can't hear anything. The first take we did, I had no click for the first 30 seconds. And I was just playing along with everybody else going, well, hopefully they've got it and I'm somewhere close. And I'm trying to do the thing. And then finally I get a mix where I go, okay, I can hear myself now. That take's done.
Yeah.
We'll do one more. I was like, thank for that. We do one more take, odd drum kit, pedals you're not used to. Done. Moving on. And you come out of there going, I didn't enjoy that.
Yeah.
That was insane. And then it's on the Tonys the next week, and there's millions of people watching it. Yeah. And you're like, and again, to go back to the earlier thing we talked about, you don't hear me hitting the rims and the flops and stuff. It sounds fine. It's all there. But when you're doing the session, you're not enjoying it.
Yeah.
So,
especially on someone else's gear. I mean, out of all the instruments you could ever play, drums is the most personal thing. It's not a guitar. All right, it might not be quite, the string heights might be different or whatever.
Yeah, but the frets are in the same place.
Yeah, exactly. It's either in tune or it's not. There's no middle ground. There is with drums, isn't there? And No, I didn't like it. And like the guy's kit, like Sean McDaniel, who's a Broadway legend and an immense drummer and the nicest person on Broadway. Yeah. He sets up kind of similar to me, but it's like putting someone else's pants on. All right, the pants, and they kind of go on. It doesn't fit, does it? And he's also a lot shorter than that. Not that I'm that tall, but he's shorter than me. So it's just, you sit down and you go, oh yeah, it looks and feels like a drum kit until you just go to play. Yeah. And then you're like, oh no, now I've got to do this with my shoulder and the crash is really close. Oh, okay. Yeah. And by the time you figure that out, session's done. Oh. We were in there 25 minutes. We did 4 or 5 pieces of music and we were out. And you're like, okay, I suppose I'll go and get a drink then and calm down. That's pressure. That's proper pressure.
It is. Right? It is. It's pressure. And that's like, I used to enjoy it more. And as I've gotten older, I don't enjoy it as much.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know whether that's an age thing. I don't know. Or you've just run out of balls. You have a certain ball count that you're willing to take. And then at some point you just go, can't it be easy now?
Hey, look, Chris, before we go, we have to talk about Neil Diamond. It's well documented, but it's Neil Diamond.
It's awesome.
Tell us about how it came about. Just give us the rundown on it.
It came about because a friend of mine recommended me to Neil's producer.
Yeah.
Because they were in a situation where all these people who are dead now, it's sad, isn't it? Ron Tutt.
Oh, God.
Another legend.
Total and utter. Yeah.
Utter legend, incredible drummer, lovely guy. And when he said I didn't get to know him more, which I'll go into as I tell you the story, but they wanted somebody that, with no rehearsal, could dive in and play an arena show.
Yeah.
So the producer had also done some stuff on Broadway, or was connected somehow with Broadway, which is unusual because he's a rock and roll guy. It's like he's out with the Eagles now.
They don't mix generally, do they?
They don't mix, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was Tina Turner's producer, Steely Dan for the set. Like, it's in that world, lovely guy. But I think he thought, if we get one of those guys that reads, then he'll have to do his prep and then he'll just go on stage and do it. So that's how my name gets thrown in the mix.
Sure.
And then they find out, oh, you're a rock and roll guy. Oh, even better. Oh, and you can read.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Best of both worlds. So it was kind of like the weirdest, oddest gig, but I fitted the mold perfect, right? So I was hired, signed a non-disclosure agreement, couldn't tell anybody, which was weird and hilarious.
Yeah.
Because they wanted an insurance policy to go on the road that if Ron was sick or Ron couldn't continue to tour or Ron got halfway through a show and decided it was too much for him, I would super sub, back to the footy references now, I would dive in.
Because Ron was an older guy at this point, wasn't he? Anyway, he was getting on. If you'll, I don't mean to be rude, about the speak ill of the dead, but he was an old man, wasn't he?
He was 79, 80.
Yeah,
and I think he'd had a couple of heart attacks.
Yeah,
and as we said before, drums, it's physical, it's hard, it's graft, and you're playing those arenas. Okay, we're all mic'd up, but you've got to hit them. You've got to play to the back of the room. Yeah. And when I would watch the band, you wouldn't get enough drums.
Sure.
So I'd be on the road with them and I'd be hidden. So I'd go to the shows and I'd sneak in after they'd started and I'd sit and watch, I'd make notes, but you just wouldn't get enough drums because Ron's just old. He just didn't have enough puff in him to just get it out. Fair enough. I probably won't have enough puff in me by the time I'm 59, never mind 79.
Just to be still playing at that age, at that level is something.
Still playing, do you know what I mean? And essentially, this story, even though I'm in it, it's about, which is what's really sweet about it, it's about two old dudes that love each other and won't give up on each other.
Yeah.
Because Neil wouldn't let him go and fire him's the wrong word, but Neil wouldn't release him.
Yeah.
And Ron wouldn't let Neil down. So you've got these two old titans of rock and roll that won't let each other down,
Total respect for each other. Love it.
Total respect. Ron had been in the band at that point for 30-something years, and Ron was the captain.
Yeah.
And Ron was essentially the band leader, which I didn't know until I got on stage the first night. That frightened the shit out of me because no one told me this. But, Neil and Ron should have said about 3 or 4 years previous, I think it's time, enjoy your retirement. Let's get someone in a bit younger. But they didn't because they respect each other. They love each other. They don't want to stop doing it. Fair enough. I wouldn't want to stop doing it. The gig was amazing.
Yeah.
So I would go out, I'd watch the shows, I'd be like, yeah, the drums are a bit quiet. But you'd see Ron, was tired and old. And then there'd be times at the shows where Ron would just stop playing for whatever reason. And I'd be sitting in the audience going, am I going to go on right now? And all this time, no one knows who I am. I'm hidden from everybody. I'm on different flights to different cities.
You're sitting out front for the shows?
Sitting out front for the shows, yeah.
Right, okay, yeah. Okay.
If they're in, let's say they were in San Francisco, then they'd leave me in LA.
Yeah.
But they'd just have me on call. There was times where they were on the East Coast, so they'd take me on the road.
Yeah.
They'd put me on a different floor in the hotel. They'd travel me on different planes.
Jeez.
If I had to get to the venue, Neil security would take Neil to the venue, then they'd come back and get me. They'd sneak me in the back door. I'd sit in the office waiting for the show to start. Once the show would start, I would then go out, Spinal Tap, through the bowels of the theatre and go and sit and watch the show.
Logistically, that's a nightmare, isn't it, for them?
It is. It's a nightmare, yeah. And you've got this guy on the road with you that everyone's asking, well, who's he? Who's that guy? And the security would just go, number 30, number 38. Here's my luggage tag, which I keep as a little memento, right?
Beautiful.
This is my luggage tag. And they'd say, he's number 38, he's here. And like, we eventually came up with the story that I was the music librarian and I was writing charts for the show for Archive.
Yeah.
So that became my cover because I would have my pad with me.
Yeah.
Because before I went on the road, I had to learn, I think it was 60 or 70 Neil songs.
Yeah. And
I had all of the desk recordings and the original recordings. And I made a Neil Diamond Bible. And if whatever Ron did, I wrote it out. It fills everything. Note for note. If he sneezed, wrote it in. To the point where when I would watch his shows early in the run and he'd do something different, I'd make a note of it and come back. I'd make a little voice memo on my phone, so the audience that was sitting around me would always like, who's this guy? And like, I'd be notes on my iPhone. Oh, that chorus is now 6 bars, not 8 bars. Or, oh, he's doing a fill into such and such. So I just had to be prepared and ready.
Yeah.
I'd go on the road, different hotel floor, different flights. And then the American tour ended. And that must have been about 4 months long. So at this point, I've been involved for about 6 months or so.
So this is your exclusive work now for 6 months, pretty much.
It wasn't my exclusive work. The way it was set up was I was on a little retainer and they give me a bunch of money to learn the songs, which is kind of unheard of, you know. So, but then whenever I was on the road, I was on road rate, which was phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah.
Neil Diamond. So I'd go on the road. We got to the end of the American tour, and there's been all kinds of weird things in between, and times where I thought I was going on and I didn't, or it's just, I'd gone through this roller coaster of emotions of like, this is the best gig I've ever gotten that I'm never going to do. And then you just start to think, well, I suppose it's a good, funny story to tell in the pub when I'm old, and all the young people go like, Jago, he's fucking crazy. He's some bullshit story about him being secretly on the road with Neil. It was just turning into that story.
Well, tell me, Chris, was Ron aware of what was going on?
I don't think he was at first, but then he was as we got into it. I think it was obviously a touchy subject because he obviously didn't want to feel like he couldn't do it.
Yeah, of course.
So I think that was how it started. And then eventually he knew what was going on. There was only maybe 5 or 6 people in the whole organization that knew for the first few months. And then, because there's 75 people that travel on the road with Neil, like an amazing crew, people that have been with him 5-10 years up to 50 years. His sound man has been with him for 50 years. Like, you don't leave a gig like that. You know what I mean? If, and everybody would go off and do stuff, but the diamond phone rings, like the bat phone, you pick it up and you go, where? I'll be there. Click.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those gigs, So you'd gotten to the end of the American tour. I'd gone through all these feelings of like, oh God, I'm never going to do it. Oh, I'm going to do it. Oh, I nearly went on. I'd call my wife and go, I almost went on last night. It looked like Ron wasn't happy. And then it wouldn't happen. And then we get to the end of the American tour And I'm thinking, they're not going to take me to Europe. They're just going to go, you know what? We haven't needed him. Ron's clearly fine. He's getting through it, you know. But at the last minute, they were like, you know what? We're going to take you to Europe. California's too far away. We just need you there. So I was like, great. So I just said to myself, I said to my wife, I hadn't told my mum and dad yet. I hadn't told anybody. I was just like, you know what? I'm never going to do this, but I'm being paid a ridiculous amount of money. I'm staying in 4 or 5-star hotels. I'm flying private planes. I'm just going to go to Europe and have the best fucking holiday ever.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah.
Just because I'd just given up on the gig and it wasn't going to happen. It was never going to be mine. Not even going to do it. Never mind be mine, you know. And so I just went to Europe with that mentality. And I got to Amsterdam. And at this point, they told everybody. They'd done a company-wide email. Okay, some of you know who Chris is. Some of you don't. He's here to help Ron out. If Ron needs him, he's going to be there for Ron. It was kind of worded like that, you know.
Yeah.
And then, I was at least out amongst the crew then, because there'd be times in America, like I would have to find out where the band were drinking and not go that bar. Oh. So I would go and find another bar. But Scousers, we find bars. We were great at finding bars. I'd walk out the hotel and I'd go that way. And I'd go and I'd find a bar and I'd be having a bevy. And then there'd be some crew guy next to me that I didn't know. And he'd look over and he'd be like, he'd wink. And I'd be like, is this a gay bar and I'm being hit on right now? Like, what's going on? You know? And then he'd sneak up and he'd go, I know who you are. And then just walk away. And I'd be like, what the fuck? The weirdest gig, you know? Anyway, now we're in Europe. Everybody knows who I am. So I'm enjoying myself. We're in Amsterdam. I go out. I get blasted. Like, drink every pint of lager that they had in Amsterdam that night. Just up till 5. Just going at it. Having a great time. Living the dream. Because I've decided it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. 9 o'clock, hotel phone goes, producer, Ron's hurt himself, you're going in tonight. And tonight was the Ziggo Dome, 17,000 people. He'd only done 2 shows of the European tour, and Ron had fell over and done his hip in.
And you've got a head like Birkenhead.
And I've got a head like Birkenhead. I'm bouncing around the walls now. Like he called my cell phone, didn't pick up. Then he called the room. So it's weird to get the hotel call, isn't it? You know, and then you're asleep and hungover and still drunk. And I'm like, hello, what, tonight? Okay, 20 minutes in the lobby. I'll be there. Click. Out of bed, cold shower, clothes on, downstairs. And it's the producer, the sound guy, Neil's assistant, and the head roadie guy. And we go to the Dome, and everyone knows what's going on. And everyone was amazing. Like, they treated me like a rock star with respect. They knew what was at stake. They couldn't have helped me anymore. We got all Ron's drums out. We set them up so I could play them. Yeah. I had my cymbals hidden backstage. I took my cymbals and my stick bag.
Sure.
Put my cymbals up. And while we were building the arena, you know, all that stuff. And then we did like a little sound check rehearsal for about maybe 30, 40 minutes that afternoon. And then I went in that night and did the 2.5-hour show.
How did it feel after all that waiting and anticipation?
Yeah, it was amazing. Like, I think, and people have a go at me when I say this because they think, well, you can't say things like that, Jago, and you never know. But I'm like, it was the peak for me. Like, I peaked that night.
I get that.
And I have no... And if I never do an artist like that again, I never play an arena again, like, so be it. Like,
Done.
I was lucky to be in that situation. Not many people get to do that. And I just feel like everything that had led up to it and my work and diligence here at the studio, writing those charts and learning that material and having done enough big gigs and theatre shows to know what was needed. And then to turn up that night in front of 17,000 people, not rehearsed, and I nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. Like, just unbelievable. And it felt amazing. And I was like, oh my God, this is like, I remember just kind of trying to take it in, you know. And at the end of the show, I remember sitting there, just everyone had left the stage and just kind of sitting on the drums going, that was fucking insane. Like, and everyone was leaving. All the old people were leaving. Stage was empty. And I was just sitting on the drums going, that's insane. All that work and all that weird time and all that traveling and all that not going to do it, never going to do it. It's just going to be a holiday. Just suddenly, I just sat in with Neil Diamond, nailed it in front of 17,000 people.
Some pinnacle.
Insane.
Some pinnacle.
Insane. So people are like, well, you don't know what's going to happen, Jago. Anybody could call you. And right, anybody could call me. But I will say it's definitely, the whole experience with Neil definitely chilled me out and made me go, you know what? I've proved I could do it.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing for me growing up and being a teenager and coming from a very working class background and choosing a career like this and believing in yourself and thinking, you know what? I can do this. Like I said to you before, when I was like 16, I was like, I think I'm good enough. I think I can do it, you know, and to be able to prove yourself at different points in your career, because there's also different points in your career where you hate what you're doing and you're down on yourself and you don't like your playing and you've got no work. Like, you have to remember these points of where I killed that. I did well there. I met a great person there. I have a great relationship with that person. I was Neil Diamond's drummer. It's a big thing for me to, you know, to have that.
Huge.
Like, and it's chilled me out in the sense of now I'm not chasing shit as much.
Yeah.
Now, you know, I still need work. I'm still doing what I'm doing. I'm not stopping for a long time, but I'm not stressed out about now. I've got to play for such and such because I did it and it felt great. I wish it lasted longer, but it didn't. It is what it is. I mean, just an incredible experience, you know.
How many shows did you do in the end?
Ended up doing most of the European tour, maybe 15 or so.
Wow, brilliant.
And then we were scheduled to go to Australia and New Zealand to do a bunch of gigs. And he wasn't going to stop at that point. So I was in then, you know.
Yeah.
Like, we'd had the conversation and I'd even gotten a pay rise. Like, it's funny when you're dealing with an artist of that caliber, you know. And I was out with the producer one night and he was like, we're having a drink in Birmingham. And he said, you should ask for a pay rise. And I was sitting there going, I had a pint in my hand and I was thinking, but that's you. So I said, well, that's you, isn't it? He said, yeah, it is. Yeah. I said, okay, I'd like a pay rise, please. And he said, well, how much more do you want? And I was like, all right, I want, you know, so many shekels more. And he was like, all right, I'll think about it. Next day, I've got your new contract, Jago. Got your pay rise. I've signed a contract. We were going to Australia, New Zealand. Like, just awesome fun memories. Awesome to be involved, even for that small amount of time in someone's career that's 50-something years, you know.
I mean, legends don't come any bigger. Let's be honest.
No, do you know what I mean? Like he's done it all. How many records has he sold? And super nice guy. Yeah. And, you know, it's super sad that the Parkinson's has just got a grip of him.
Yeah. So,
you know,
do you know, you know, you're still a young man, whether you like it or not, and you've had some career, so far, and you're only part way through it. And mate, I take my hat off to you. I really do. It's an incredible story.
Thank you.
It really is.
Thank you.
So I have to ask: did Neil Diamond pay for your studio then?
He probably did pay a little bit for this studio. Yeah, he did have what I really wanted when we had the sad day of going to pick our equipment up from his warehouse, which is in town here.
Yeah.
There was a cardboard cutout of Neil from the 70s life-size one. And I wanted to get it. He wouldn't let me take it. He was like, maybe in the future. So I've still got my eyes on that. I want to get it and put it up in the corner.
Oh,
that would be amazing. But this studio, I will say, he did help pay for it. But I also built a lot of it myself.
Oh, did you? Oh, good on you. Fair play.
Which again comes from that tradesman mentality of, as you're going through your life, you learn how to do shit.
Yeah.
So I did a bunch of work on this. So I actually saved myself some money.
You got your hands dirty.
Get my hands dirty.
Love it. Mate, this is honestly, I think this is going to have to be a two-parter, this one. I have to split it down the middle. I know you've got to go.
Oh. Yeah, I'm taking my kids to PT.
Hey, it's what you have to do, isn't it?
Hang on. Someone's starting to call me. My wife's calling me now.
There we go. Chris, thank you, mate.
Yes, absolutely, mate. Pleasure. Let me know. We can always talk again.
It's been a joy, honestly. What can I say? Fantastic, mate. You're a diamond.
Awesome, mate. All right. There we go. See, we tied it in. We tied it in.
Beautiful. Enjoy the rest of your day, mate. Thank you very much.